If you're watching this video, then you are on the section dealing with the Scene 2 paragraph, which means that you have completed all of this work here. You've completed the actual graph and you've completed the paragraph analysis. So this part is the figurative language, where we trace, first starting with what figurative language is. So you really need to have a definition. And then you move to this box to the right. What are the exact words in the text that you find an example of figurative language? And you're going to write those exact words in this little box. And then you're going to identify in box 3 what figurative language you're talking about. So in other words, figurative language can be, as a reminder, we studied this a few weeks ago, we can do simile, we can do metaphor, personification. Those are the three main examples of figurative language that we discussed in class. So simile and metaphor are always comparison. And as a review, simile uses like or as. So you're comparing one thing to another thing with the word either like or as. Metaphor is when one thing just is something else. She is a rose. She is as beautiful as a rose is a simile. She just is a rose is a metaphor. A metaphor can also be in the form of a verb, as we learned before. So my mother's head exploded. So, my mother's head really didn't explode, right? So we have these exaggerations. We have things that really don't belong with the other. And in a lot of literature, what you find for simile or metaphor would be, again, something that doesn't really belong in the context or meaning of what it is that you're reading. And in Antigone, like a lot of literature, we can hear or look for a metaphor or a simile when we see references to animal imagery. So especially in Scene 2, you have this very famous figurative language that we studied in class when when the century is speaking about Antigone. And then we also have a statement Creon makes towards the end of the scene. But Antigone, Creon, the century, they all use examples of figurative language. So your eye can either look for the like or as, or animal imagery, or a comparison of just something else that doesn't belong in that moment to create this description. So the actual definition of figurative language, if we want to take a look at the dictionary definition, is as simple as a comparison. So when you describe something in vivid detail by comparing it to something else, and the words and phrases don't really have the literal meaning. It's not really happening that way. And we've studied here metaphor and simile as well as personification. And personification is giving non-human things human-like qualities. And we remember it with the very beginning of the word person. So personification is exactly that. As you work through this chart, the boxes get increasingly more challenging, and I call it an MCAS prep because boxes 4 and 5, and especially 5, are really the exact types of questions you're going to get on MCAS. So I told you last week that I will be giving you every single question from last year's MCAS as in the context of what we're studying now. And so 4 and 5 are really from the test. So what does this example of figurative language reveal about Creon or Antigone is super important. So in order to do that, what do you have to do in your brain? You have to know what is being compared, right? If figurative language is a comparison, so you need to know how that thing that doesn't belong in that comparison, that is not literal, how does that tell you more about either Creon or Antigone? So use the image. In Ode to Man, when the chorus was saying how wonderful man was in the previous scene, they were talking about a bull with broad shoulders. And so that animal with broad shoulders is as strong as humankind, is what the chorus was saying. So there it would be strength. It reveals the strength, and not only strength with the bull with wide shoulders, I mean incredible strength that is not going to crack. So this one, and this one's hard. So what is the effect of this figurative language on Creon or Antigone, or both. Specify 2 ways this example of figurative language helps to develop either Creon or Antigone. So what is confusing about this question is that your brain is tasked with doing multiple things at once. And so we need to chunk the question. The very first thing is effect. What does that mean? It means the result, right? So what's the point of this figurative language? What is the effect? What are we looking at here? What do we learn? How are they changed, right? So if we were dealing when the chorus is talking about man with the bull with broad shoulders, the effect of this on the character of humankind, right, is that not only is it strong, but it's so strong that it's not going to give up, right? So the effect is that it lifts up humankind or man. And then here, specify 2 ways this example of figurative language helps to develop. So this exactly is an MCAS question. And if you're writing an open response for MCAS, which this kind of gets to, right? An open response is a fancy way of saying a very long paragraph or two good-sized paragraphs of like 7 sentences, right? So one of the possible ways that you can see this question is multiple choice. The other way you could see this question is as it's written here in an open response. So it's open, you respond to it. So you have to take each word in that prompt separately. First, we have to have 2 ways, right? And that will help us with our extension, our body paragraphs for this open response. But then we have to figure out the word develop. You're going to see this a lot on MCAS. And what I want you to start thinking is that develop equals change. So something develops like a child develops, or a flower develops. It grows and it changes. And there's different stages. So in order to show that either Creon or Antigone are developing, we need to show that they're changed, right? So anytime you see the word develop on MCAS, think change. And you have to identify, to prove change, you have to identify, obviously, how they changed. So Antigone was one way, and now she's another way, as a result of, getting back to this word effect, as a result of this figurative language example, because, right? So another trick when you're writing the open response is to literally begin by stealing the language from the prompt. This makes sure that your writing is clear and it's focused. And the more you take from the prompt and you feed it in to start your writing, right? That way you'll never forget how to start the writing if you start by stealing their language. But it centers your writing and it provides a guide for the reader grading your essay. So oftentimes they're reading thousands of essays, and the more that you reference it back by using the exact language of the question or the prompt, then you're going to have not only a focused essay, and you're going to make sure, or open response, and you're going to make sure that you go back to the question. So I always say before you're finished writing, go back to the question or the prompt, same thing, question, prompt, and again, use the key word. So if I'm looking at develop, I'm going to make sure I have developed throughout my open response, and if I don't, I'm going to sneak it back in, right? Just to check it, like check it before you wreck it. And then I'm going to also close it out by repeating the language that I read in the prompt. So those are some tricks. We're going to talk more about writing strategies for MCAS, but you can practice them right here. And so after you're done with the 5 boxes, you are done with this assignment, and you can move on to the next assignment, which is the comparison and the self-reflection.